Good morning, my friends. Good morning, my friends. Good morning, my friends. Oh, 5. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? How are you doing, Dread? Good morning. Good morning, my Dread. Get it? It's kind of like my friend, except my Dread. Morning, Craig T. Height. Amigo. How are you? Let's do this, Dread. Dread, we got a fun one today. Because I'm going to think through some stuff. I'm going to think through some stuff that I don't fully grasp right now. Eric Albright, welcome. So what you're going to hear is learning in motion. Learning in motion. Because we're going to talk about stuff that we don't fully understand. Kevin, Salm, my man. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, Kevin. Kevin was a former guest on the show. Kevin, do you remember what episode number it was? So I can throw that out there. Because Kevin Salm's my friend. He came all the way up here. From Jersey to sit in my living room and to record a show on his podcast, and that guy taught me a little something about human energy. So Kevin has a podcast. Kevin, I'm gonna toot your whistle a little bit. So Kevin has a podcast called the Heads and Tails Podcast. Kevin was on the show, incredible episode. Dread, can you jog your memory bank there? Can you remember? Thanks for the share, Dread. Dread, can you remember what number Kevin was? I don't have my phone in front of me, else I would scroll through it. I do actually have my phone right in front of me, but I can't scroll through it. So Kevin suffered from concussion and then post-concussion, and it was just it dramatically changed his life. So he has a podcast which explores, would you say, safety and trauma in sports, Kevin? I think, that's a pretty good summation, I think. But anyhow, so he has these, he has a podcast, Heads and Tails, HEADSNTALES. Great wordplay there, Kevin. Kudos to you for that one. And he said, no, I want to take a trip up. I want to sit in your living room and talk with you. And I was like, wow, that's investment. Like, that's work. You're traveling, 5 hours round trip for an hour conversation. That's pretty impressive. And then he told me, Kevin, I'm sorry. Kevin, I'm sorry if you're blushing. If I could hit the blushing face right now, I'd hit the blushing face. But then he said how he would go out, like he went to Pittsburgh to record a podcast, etc. But anyway, the point is, it's work. And it's slow growth. And it's those connections that, just that exchange of energy that really, I don't know, I started to dig after he did that, and I thought, wow, that's really smart. And I'll tell you this, Dread, do you know why? Dread, so listeners, if you remember me going through Jack Canfield's success principles, do you know why we went through that? Why we're certified in the Jack Canfield Train the Trainer program? Because Kevin introduced me to someone else. Someone else ran into Todd. Todd is partners with Patty and Jack, and this other person said to Todd, hey, do you know anyone? Yeah, the Spaniard might fit that bill. Here, episode 82 is Kevin. And, yeah, I know a guy. So, boom. So, by way of Kevin, by way of someone else, by way of Todd, boom. Dread, you and I are certified. So, thank you very much for that. All right. So, that's that, my friends. All that talking. So bottom line is, Kevin Salm, thanks for showing up today. Episode number 82, if you want to hear a compelling episode with my friend, Kevin Salm of the Heads and Tails podcast. Also, Rival Brothers Coffee, if you want to hear another example of a hard worker who creation maybe it's creation, maybe it's ownership, maybe it's, I don't even know what the the actual whatever is, but it just feels good to build something. Feels good to build something you can call your own. Kind of like raising a family. You know, it's fun to look at your kids and think, I made that. That's my product right there. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. That's equating kids to a podcast, I guess. Gracie, Rocky, you're more than a podcast to me. I promise. All right, so we just knocked out some push-ups. Hit a record today, 1,033 minutes. I was listening to Jocko Willink on the James Altucher podcast. That was a good listen. So that was fun. Went to the old Payne Street Gym this morning. Got that out of the way. Now I'm good to go. Speaking this afternoon. Wow. Speaking, it's always so interesting. So I post social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Those are my go-tos. Some of it's original content. Some of it's across the board. There's probably better ways to do it, but frankly, a bunch of my time goes into this, so not so much into that. But it's always very interesting to see what gets feedback and what doesn't get feedback. And this is part of the mastery of Gary Vee, right? Learning, what is best where. But, I'll make a post on Instagram that gets no feedback, and then I'll make that same post on Facebook, and it'll get a bunch of feedback. Case in point, I posted a picture yesterday of me at a Meet the Author event at the library, and it got 24 likes on Facebook and not a lot of likes on Instagram. So it's always interesting to see that dichotomy. Dichotomy is the word we're talking about today. So this should be pretty fun. Like I said, I'm going to work out. If you can imagine a comic working his way through his material, I'm going to work my way through this right now. And what you all should do is click on that link above, charliespaniard.com/reading list, and get this book. Well, it's actually not up there yet, but it is actually up there. You have to scroll down, but I got to put the updated link there. So get this book, read this book. It will serve you well in your jaunt. Thank you, Giovanni, my friend. Thank you. All right, so let's give me a second here to get situated. JJ Groove. JJ Groovy. Ben, JJ's watching. Ben's watching. Hi. All right. Okay, I'm just going to go with it. 1, 2, 3. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to AMXkids 473. Today's episode is inspired by the book Extreme Ownership, written by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. You can get that book, as well as every other book I read, at charliespaniard.com/reading list. Now, today's the last day I'm going to be talking about my experiences with extreme ownership. And I'm telling you now, this book, if you're a leader, if you're an aspiring leader, and you're going to hear something at the end that should not only just maintain that glimmer of hope of one day being an accomplished leader, but not just like let that flame in you, but like really ignite that flame. Because I'm going to tell you something that Jocko said that's going to make you think, wait, I can do that. But the first thing I want to talk about is this. Now, I was telling Facebook Live a second ago, imagine a comedian working his way through material. So there are so many things that I read, and I try to comprehend and I understand and I write down, I take notes. But at the end of the day, I'm reading and then performing 10 minutes later. Many times, actually, I'll perform the night before or I'll prepare the night before for about 20 minutes. It takes me to prepare this lesson plan. I'll sleep, I'll wake up, I'll look at the notes, I'll record, boom, there, I'm talking. So there's not much kind of sifting through the material, right? It's kind of an art. I guess it's a craft that I'm learning to do better and better. But one of the things I read yesterday, so imagine a comedian on stage working on his material. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I was on stage yesterday. I was recording yesterday, and I read and I saw this word dichotomy, right? The dichotomy of leadership. And I started thinking to myself, what is what is this word dichotomy? I've heard it before. I've said it before. I get that mixed up with the word paradox as well. So I went to the dictionary because Jocko talks about this thing called the dichotomy of leadership. And I'm thinking to myself, what does that actually mean? So I did what I do, and I went to Google and I typed in dichotomy. And a dichotomy says this: a division or contrast between two things that are or represented as being opposed or totally different. Something with seemingly contradictory qualities. So I honestly looked up 5 different definitions of that word, and I could not come to a grasp. And then I found one that it said a dichotomy is contrasting two things. Okay? So the dichotomy of leadership is essentially saying this, that you need to be this thing as a leader, but you also need to sometimes be this thing. Or you need to be this thing, but not so much so that you're this thing, which is the opposite of that. All of this sounds very nuanced, and that's because it is nuanced, meaning that leadership is not absolute. Right? You can't, I remember hearing Jocko one time say you can't bulletize leadership. So you cannot bulletize leadership. What you can do is you can operate in principles of leadership, and then within those principles you have leeway to ebb and flow, to jab, to jive, to up, to down, to left, to fast, to slow, to alternate, to slip step, all those different things, right? But it is within these principles. That's exactly what this book, Extreme Ownership, will do for you. Now, I dove into dichotomy a little bit more. And some of the examples of the dichotomy of leadership to kind of put a visualization or put image or put kind of structure to what I'm talking about here is Jocko says this: these are some of the dichotomies of leadership. So some of the things that you must be, but not so much so that you're this thing that is the opposite. First and foremost, you must lead. As a leader, you must lead, but also follow. So you have to be forthright. You have to be willing. You have to be, blaze that trail, right? But at times, you need to follow. There's always a time to step back, let someone else who knows more than you know take the lead. Another thing is you must be aggressive but not overbearing. I love this one. You can hear the smile in my voice. You must be aggressive but not overbearing. As a fighter, I think in fighting terms, you've got to be aggressive. But if you're overbearing, you're going to leave yourself open for a smack or a kick to the chin or a knee to the jaw. Another thing, you've got to be confident but not cocky. Now, these are 3 examples of probably 10 or 15 that he gives in the book. You've got to be confident but not cocky. There is a fine line. And if you look at the best of the best of the best, you see them tip that scale. Case in point, Conor McGregor. Right? Conor McGregor is at that point where, wait a minute, is he tipping the scale? I don't know. I remember one time, after I beat Rick Story, Frank Edgar, I was talking to him on the phone, and he said to me, believe the hype. Right? But even in that, there is nuance. Even in that, there is a dichotomy. You've got to believe the hype. You've got to believe that you can do it. You've got to believe that you're the best in the world. But at the same time, you've got to maintain that humility. And this whole idea, talking about this dichotomy, it made me reflect on that idea of, you know what I say about the strengths being your weaknesses or your streaknesses? Your strengths and your weaknesses, your streaknesses. It ties along with that. And that's when I'm working through this material. So you have the dichotomy, which is a contrasting of two things that are seemingly opposites that can coexist. But then you also have this idea of your strengths being your weaknesses. I feel like that's a paradox, or that's a dichotomy in and of itself. For me personally, I started to reflect on these. I would encourage you to do this as well. Write down your strengths that are your weaknesses, because as I was writing through here, you're going to hear 5 or 7 of them. You're going to smile, you're going to laugh, you're going to self-reflect. I encourage you to do this on your own. Well, a couple of the things with me, my strengths that are weaknesses, or possible dichotomies that exist within me. First, I'm detail-oriented. But if I'm too detail-oriented, that leads me to being OCD. When I read these books, I want to remember everything, so I take notes, and I realize I'm underlining the entire book, so I have to scale back. Being humble versus being too passive. Look, I am so overly obsessed with not coming off as an arrogant jerk that oftentimes I'm too passive. Oftentimes, I just don't ask. So you can't be too humble such that you don't ask and sell yourself short. I'm very curious, but I can also be overbearing. I'm very curious in that I want to know, I want to ask questions, I want to sit, I want to study, I want to learn. But then that's also overbearing where it's like, honey, this is my wife talking, honey, stop asking questions, right? So you got to walk that line. I invite feedback and opinions, but I want to do it my own way. So all of these are just these, start to dive into them. Ask yourself, what are my strengths, but what are my weaknesses, and how do I walk that line, right? Think of Johnny Cash, walking the line. You got to walk the line between this and that, understanding that leadership is nuanced, understanding that there are dichotomies that exist, and it's our job as leaders and aspiring leaders to walk that line. And what I want to send off here, what I want to leave you with is this, and I alluded to this at the beginning of today's episode. In the close, in the book, it says this: with a mindset of extreme ownership, any person can develop into a highly effective leader. So with a mindset of extreme ownership, it's all on me. Do not blame, complain, or make excuses. Any person can develop into a highly effective leader. Leadership is and or can be learned. Leadership, you can learn to be a leader, just like you can learn to do. I learned, trust me, becoming a UFC fighter was a learned behavior. I'm not a natural fighter, right? I have traits and characteristics that lended itself to honing that craft and becoming a professional fighter, but I am not a born fighter. I learned to become that thing. So how can you learn to become a leader? I'm going to give you a couple simple things that you can start with today. Start by employing humility. Be humble. Think of yourself in a modest way. Be honest. Tell the truth. Don't lie. Create trust in relationships with those around you. Show respect. In everything to everyone, show respect. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Jocko, and it talked about respecting your enemies, to know what they are bringing towards you. Discipline. Start getting up early. Start drinking water. Start reading books. Start studying. Start taking notes. All of that employs discipline. Those are 4, 5 easy ways to start developing your leadership craft. This has been AMX 473. Please hop on over to charliespaniard.com for all things I got going on. So I'll tell you something. Tell you something that behind the scenes. So if you can remember, Dred, you're going to like this. If you can remember, early in that episode, I kind of stuttered a little bit. I kind of stumbled a little bit, right? And I feel like I said record when I recorded, and I just like stumbled over my words. The reason I stumbled over my words is, okay, look at that. I can't see what you see. Okay. Here is supposed to be sound waves, meaning that there is a file there. So what I realized midway through recording is this is not recording. And I thought to myself, do I stop talking and not record and start over? And then I thought, but I never do that. If I'm on stage, I can't really just stop. I have to keep going. So I decided to keep going. And I kind of dread, I'm anxious to talk to you about this in the future, but, or not in the future, like in a minute. But I'm curious if anyone would notice or did notice and would notice. If you did, it's fine. You don't have to say I didn't notice, but that's why I was stumbling over my words. So right now it says we have a file that is 7 minutes and 59 seconds, but there is no sound waves. Everything's plugged in. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. So anyway, I don't know. I'm gonna have to extract it somehow. Anyway, that's that, my friend. So that is some behind the scenes techno work. All right, so be bold. I'll see you tomorrow morning for AMX 474 tomorrow, and I'll take care of this. I might have to extract the audio from the Facebook video, but either way, be bold, my friends. See you tomorrow.